Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Joke Maniac.
And I'm your other host, DM Derrick, aka How Not to DM. And today we're really excited to welcome our friends Willy and James from MCDM to talk about their brand new RPG they're rolling out called Draw Steel.
Definitely. As a continuation of the What Is series, you've previously heard What Is Tales of the Valiant, and today you are going to be hearing about What Is Draw Steel as we continue to scour the earth, apparently, for any RPG that we can find that the people who made it are willing to talk to us. I have it on good authority, namely because the only authority here is Derek and I, that we'll probably be talking to some more creators, but I don't want to write a check that I can't cash, but I know we're really close to getting some other people. And as always, if you have another RPG that you want to suggest, feel free to email us, as always, at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com and suggest another RPG that you think we should ask the question, what is?
And today we have a 5-star review to read from goodpods.com. This is from Not Greams. It's Griims. I'm going to assume 2 I's is E, not an I. Not Greams, not Grims. A good time for DMs levels 1 to 20. I've been listening to this podcast for a while and it's helped me make wonderful and interesting worlds for my players to enjoy and allowed me to make my adventures more enjoyable. Thank you so much for making this podcast. Thank you, Not Grims, for that review.
As always, a Catacon is fast approaching. And if anyone is wanting to go to a Catacon and wanting to purchase a badge, I have a fun little code, and that code is DMNeal5. I have no idea if this is case sensitive, so capital DMNEAL5 will get you $5 off when you go to buy a badge. And the badges come out at 8/19 around noon Eastern time. I love that the information I was provided was around noon. I don't even know what that means, but how exciting. Edge of your seat, everybody.
I wonder how DM Neal's 1 through 4 are getting along with their codes.
They're not as good as mine, but DM Neal 6 through 10 are doing great.
Probably. The last announcement we have before we jump into the meat is this. Another kind of mini con here in Utah. If you are a DM's Block listener in Utah, I am planning on appearing at least for a couple of hours at the iCast Fireball meetup that is happening on August 9th at Game Grid. That's Game Grid in Lehi, Utah. So if you live here or around here, come check out the iCast Fireball meetup. Like I said, I would plan to be making a cameo, but they're going to be playing board games. They're going to be playing one-shots in various TTRPGs, including 5e and a few others. And they'll do some Q&As and stuff. You can meet the cast of the show, iCast Fireball. It is an actual play. It's a lot of fun. They're in their 2nd season right now, and longtime listeners of DM's Block will recognize Josh Lorimer as a current cast member of iCast Fireball. So if you were a big Sneak Attack fan back in the day and you want to get more Josh in your life, that's a great place to check them out. So again, that is August 9th at the Lehi, Utah Game Grid from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. You can learn more about that at tabletop.events/i-cast-fireball-2025. And again, we'll throw that link in the notes here, along with that link to a Catacon. So if you are local in Utah, you want to come hang out, it would be great to see you. And it would be great to help support some other cool shows and friends of us as well. It's going to be $10 for the pass. Really affordable. A lot of fun. Hope to see you there.
But with that, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
So today for the meat, we have 2 very special guests. First and foremost, a returning guest, Gold Jacket. You've got to get a gold jacket by now. James Introcaso, lead game designer at MCDM, and Willy Abeel, muse, debonair, scamp, and senior game designer at MCDM. Thank you both for coming on. I am very, very excited about today's topic.
Oh, thank you for having us. This is going to be a lot of fun. I am always happy to be on with MCDM's official scamp. So this is going to be a good time.
It's an official title. You just heard it here.
So we're immediately going to not talk to James because we've talked to James a whole bunch before. So Willy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Something that that you think the listeners would love to hear about you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Willy. So I've been doing game design sort of by moonlight and by sunlight at this point. A couple of years now, like 12, 15 at this point. I can't remember. Time isn't real. I was professionally a UX designer, UX UI designer, UX UI game designer across the tech field and in mobile games as well. I was working over at Niantic right before I jumped on board with MCDM. And here we are working on Draw Steel about a year later tomorrow. No, 2 days from now.
Yeah.
Perfectly timed.
Willy's 1 year anniversary coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And how about you, James? I mean, most people around here should know who you are, but anything new to add?
Yeah, longtime guest of Dungeon Masters Block, which today we will call the director's clipboard instead, in honor of Draw Steel. We'll get to that in a minute. No, I've been now for a little over 4 years at MCDM as the lead game designer. This is the first year, though, that I have actually had anyone on staff under me as a team. So we have Willy and we have another guy named Jordy on staff who are senior game designers, and they're both really incredible, and it's been a really great year. So I'm really glad to bring someone else on to talk to Neal and to you because, well, I think you're getting bored of me, and that's fair. That's fair.
Well, the real test will be if you come back and or if only Willy comes back. So question number 2, though, is there anything that you're currently working on? And of course, that you can tell us about.
So I will just set the stage here so that Willy can feel safe talking about whatever Willy wants to talk about, which is that we explicitly don't have NDAs over at MCDM. And the reason is because no one will tell you faster than Matt Colville what we are working on.
That's so true.
It feels like every time we have a meeting about a new product, he is on stream within 5 minutes telling an audience of like 500 people what we're doing, which is great. It makes it a very good atmosphere for us because it means we can talk about whatever. So right now we're finishing up the core rules for a role-playing game, Draw Steel, which we're going to talk about. And then we're working on a bunch of different adventures and supplements for Draw Steel because we're planning on continuing to work on that in the future. I am also working on a little bit of a side project right now of a dungeon crawling role playing game because we've been so busy getting heroic that I'm working on a little something else. But that's on my own.
I mean, I went through my list of everything I've been working on with you just this morning, James. So like I'm working through a ton of new like ancestries past the core book. I finished up an outline for an adventure I'm going to be penning probably next month, which is coming up very soon. I've also got sort of my first toe in a couple of the encounters that we're going to be working on for the encounter book, which should be coming up after we wrap up on the first 2 core books, as it were. That's core book number 3, I think is what we're calling it.
Core book number 3. Yeah, the encounters book, which will have a bunch of drop encounters. You want to tell them a little bit some of the ancestries and maybe the class that you're working on, Willy?
Oh yeah, there's also the class too. Okay, so of course I'm fiddling around with our goblins and Raiden Whites. So we've got some interesting options there that will kind of expand more than what you've seen in the monster book proper. So you can really feel like the most goblin-y goblin that you want to be, as it were. And find some more interesting ways to utilize Ratmen in your games with the Raiden Whites. In addition to that, I've also got on the stove at the moment the fairies ancestry and the gnome ancestry. I'm basically trying to figure out how to make sort of tiny little guys work out really well in play. And I've got a hypothesis. A hypothesis. That's the one. And I think it's going to work out, but it needs a little bit more testing before I can kind of show off what I've been cooking there. And in addition to that, kind of in parallel to that, I am working on the Summoner. So our next, probably one of our next classes that we're going to be building out for Draw Steel. So that whole idea of managing a bunch of little guys on the field rather than just sort of throwing out a spell that kind of like simulates it, or just having other sorts of like instances of gameplay with the summoner that doesn't quite live up to that fantasy that you really want, that you kind of have been expecting out of something like Diablo, for instance, but at the tabletop. So
very cool. Very cool. The surprise question for us today is, how many different names for Draw Steel were there, and are there any you can share with us that you kind of iterated through before you decided upon the name Draw Steel?
That is a great question. And the answer is, yeah, there were a bunch of names. I have a spreadsheet somewhere because there are other RPGs that we have talked about making, right? We've talked about making an RPG called Crows, which is about like going into dungeons and being a little murder hobo money grubber, right? An RPG called Dead World Under a Black Star that is like a science fantasy Western type smash up, right? And then we were like, but for our flagship RPG that we are making, we do not know what it is called yet. And that's why when it went to crowdfunding as the MCDM RPG, right? And it wasn't that we knew that wasn't going to be the name, although a lot of people did say to us that they wanted it to be the name because they got so used to referring to it as that way. But yeah, there were a bunch of different names that were thrown out there. One was Vanquish. It was a name that a lot of people really liked and was a strong contender for a while. There was Until the Last Villain Gasps. Like we had some long, more poetic names. There was one about like I can't remember. I need to find it. So I'm looking as we're talking here. But there's a lot about like ending tyranny and tyrants, right, and stuff like that. But we ultimately ended on Draw Steel, which was something we came up with like at one point, and then we thought about it for a while and like let it gel, and everybody really liked it, and then we finally revealed it. And in fact, we were torn between that and that other name, Vanquish, for a while. And our general manager, who writes the information for our crowdfunding campaigns, right, worked the phrase "Draw Steel" into the body copy of it to try to like start getting people ready, because he was like, "This is my choice, and I hope that we do this one." And so yeah, Draw Steel was in there, and a couple people sort of guessed it, and then maybe someone who works at the office, who shall remain nameless, may have on stream accidentally referred to the game as Draw Steel and alerted the community at one point. And all I'll say is that person is a very handsome lead game designer, and it should be forgiven for that sin, and was. So yeah.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I'm always interested to hear like what some other ideas people had were and kind of the process that it was to decide on it. So, but yeah, I think Draw Steel is very evocative. It rolls off the tongue a little bit better than MCDM RPG, if I do say so myself. But you know, that's cool. I like it.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, I would say one of the number one questions we get is, what does MCDM stand for, right? And so then having to explain that in an acronym, as part of an acronym that's a string, really gets people like, okay, what is this? What are you doing? This and that? And it's, yeah. So yeah, Draw Steel, I think, is a great name for the RPG, and it helps people know that like this is a game that at its core is about fighting monsters, right? And we're not shying away from that.
Yeah.
Combat.
Well, perfect. We've got all of the interview section out of the way, and that means we are headed to the meat, and that means I have to explain why we're doing this, because it was my idea. So I guess that falls to me, because the series is entitled What Is, and the topic today is what is Draw Steel, because I have been wanting to start diving into some of the other RPGs that are starting to come out. Some of them are closer to D&D than others, but ultimately one of the things that drives me day in, day out is reading other RPGs. I have been a huge proponent of that, regardless of anything else. Like, it's going to make you better at whatever RPG is yours. Like, if it's D&D, if it's Call of Cthulhu, if it's Pathfinder, if it's Dragonbane, if it doesn't matter what it is. If you're reading another RPG, inevitably you will be better at the one you like running by reading another one. So that is my main motivation. Or you find out that it's the one you want to start running, because everything is going to be better at doing something because the person that wrote it has a motivation for the reason that they wrote it. And that's probably what we're going to start to figure out with this conversation. So the first question is, surprise, surprise, what is draw steel. So yeah, like kind of like what is like when you talk about that ad copy or like that elevator pitch or like what is like yeah, essentially what is draw steel?
So Draw Steel is a cinematic, tactical, heroic fantasy role-playing game. It is a game where you play warriors, wizards, knights, right, and that sort of thing, but you are explicitly heroic, right? So there isn't it is a game that goes deep on these concepts, right? We go deep into tactical. We go deep into heroic. We go deep into cinematic in that you can visualize it really clearly in your mind what is going on. And it is not then a game that is about like tracking torches or rations, right? Or solving murders or that kind of thing, right? Like we go deep into like, this is what this game is. And those are sort of the 4 design pillars that we stuck our Draw Steel brand onto. So tactical, meaning it's played on a grid, positioning and movement matter in combat, but also the choices you make for your character, both combat and not combat related. There's a lot of choice you make as you build your character that have ramifications, right? And if you'd picked one, you'd be better at this. And if you'd picked another, you'd be better at that, right? It's cinematic in that, like, we want things to be evocative and we want you to be able to picture them in your mind. We want teamwork to matter and we want you to think of things as, oh my God, holy moly, that is amazing, right? And then fantasy, good news. We all know what that is. If you're listening to Dungeon Master's Block, you know fantasy is like dragons and elves and stuff.
There may be a dragon, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And heroic, meaning that like your heroes, the player characters are explicitly heroes. They are there to do the right thing, and they are there to do it because it is the right thing to do. Not that they're not flawed or complicated.
Sure.
So I'm interested. Obviously, Dungeons and Dragons is built on those 3 pillars of of exploration, of roleplay, and of combat. Was it a decision to build a game specifically focused on kind of one aspect of it just because that's what MCDM fans like? Was it because that's what you all like? A combination of the two, or something completely different?
Just so you know, there's a division of labor here that I think is good to know. We have 2 core rulebooks. I was the lead designer of the hero book and everything, and Willy was the lead designer of the monster book. And these books are equally important to the game. And we both worked on both, right? Like I did stuff in monsters, Willy did stuff in heroes. So we've done a lot of cross-pollinating and talking. But I think in terms of the focus on combat, right? Like I think one reason we brought that up is because if you look at Dungeons and Dragons, right? It is a game that ostensibly you can do everything in. I would argue that is not the case, but that is what perhaps some of the marketing would like you to believe, or some of the fans of the game.
It's what it's used for.
Yeah. But that like 90% of the things you get from your class and from, the species that you pick and all that kind of stuff is combat related, right? And that the way you get experience points is by fighting and defeating monsters, right? And so I would argue that is actually a combat game, and that there are lots of games that are better for investigating mysteries because the majority of the mechanics they have are about that, right? So I think we just didn't want to shy away from the fact that like, hey, this is a game, we're going to lean into this, and by saying this is what we want, 1, we'll let you know if that's not what you want, then you can go somewhere else. And if it is what you want, hey, we've got that for you, right? But then 2, it allowed us then in our design meetings to be sort of unabashedly like, hey, you should be able to do this. But it is a role-playing game, right? And so we do have a robust system for negotiation. We have a robust system for handling what we call montage tests, what some other people might call skill challenges in other games. We have ways to adjudicate things outside of combat for sure. And we also encourage people like you get rewarded if you avoid a combat encounter because you have clever thinking or you choose to negotiate your way through or whatever, you get the experience point, like our experience point equivalent for doing that. Like, hey, you didn't fight that battle, but you did this, so you get that anyway, right? And so I think for us, a big part of it was just like, we want to let people know what this is, and also it will help us set our design goals. And that's why we went deep on a few concepts rather than really broad, because then we would, it feels like, do you want to get an A in a few subjects, or do you kind of want to get like a D+ across the board, right? And so we chose to get an A in a few subjects.
That makes complete sense.
It's easy to think of sort of tactical, cinematic, heroic fantasy as more of our principles rather than our pillars in that regard, especially when you compare it to the D&D pillars, since that directly relates to the kind of game modes that they're trying to kind of create in their game. Whereas this is something that's going to be across our montages, our negotiations, and our combats. We have to make sure that we keep these principles in mind.
Well said.
If that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it's It helps because I assume then it makes it easier when you have a discussion, because then you have a guiding light. You have it's the same concept as when you start something and you have a mission and a vision where you say, well, does it do that? Oh, it doesn't.
But was it heroic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's helpful because that's what you do. You say, does it do the thing we all said that it should do? Oh, it doesn't. And that can still be okay. But it always gives a reference point when having the discussion, because it can still not do that. But then you have to justify why it's not doing that. Or just throw it out and say, well, it's not doing that. Do we reshape it so that it does the thing that we need it to do?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it also makes me think of, this is a really weird reference, so please join me. You know those bikes with a really big wheel in the front? It's called a penny farthing bike.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. The penny farthing.
Yeah. So, okay. Go with me. But because if you think of the pillars and there's 3 pillars and it's a stool, but I like the idea of a bicycle. But if you have this, like, if you just fully commit and that one wheel is just really, really big and it still works, but like not everyone wants a penny farthing bike, but the person that does just loves it so
all
much.
In.
Yeah. But that's the same concept that like, I feel like we're kind of talking about here is like, as long as you're fully committing to the concept, that the people that want the penny farthing bike are so excited. And the people that don't, okay, then don't buy a penny farthing bike. So like when the concept of cinematic is always interesting to me because it is a thing that I think people always sit down and want, because I think it is, especially in more modern D&D times, in more modern avenues by which people are introduced to D&D now. Not the way not the way that I was introduced to D&D, because that's not the cinematic version of D&D wasn't as available.
Right.
You think just let's say 5th edition forward, Critical Role, you think Acquisitions Inc., you think the actual D&D movie, the actual cinematic version of D&D that you could go to the actual cinema and see. There's actual cinematic versions, Vox Machina on Amazon Prime. There are so many actual cinematic versions of D&D that I think people are thinking that is so readily available, but it's not in the nature of it. Like you can do it. I can do it. But that's up for years of practice. So like when that's a pillar, like what are kind of the levers that you have as a person running the game to like really make that cinematic piece easier for a person that sits down to run Draw Steel?
Yeah, Willy, I'd love for you to talk about this from the monster perspective and malice and stuff like that. From our side, right? Like one thing that we do for you as the director, right, is that as we set up your players to start as heroes who can do some kind of ridiculous things from first level, right? So like, if you play a Black Ash Shadow rogue, right, you're teleporting all over the shop. You can just teleport at will short distances, kind of like Nightcrawler, right? And we have our wizard equivalent is this class called the Elementalist, kind of not exactly a wizard equivalent, but they are able to reach out and like melt an object if they are a fire elementalist, right? They can just touch something and melt it, right? So there are all these different things that people can do that, like in other games, might hey, this is going to be a thing that like you can do once or you can do whatever, but we're letting people do a lot of these things at will, or there are things that are really powerful that you can do once in a while. And that helps you as a director actually create something more cinematic, because you're like, okay, well, I know that I am dealing with heroes already, right? So I feel fine throwing challenges that are a little bit more than what they might get in a normal D20 fantasy game at level 1, right? Like, so we could be fighting demons coming through portals. We can be, in this space where, hey, you're fighting goblins, but you're fighting 20 goblins at once. You're not fighting like 4 at once, right? And so the rules sort of allow for that by having these slightly more powerful characters, that you can have these more powerful sort of super heroic moments right from the beginning that are cinematic. And we also have an objective-based combat system that allows you to do things not just like kill them all, right? It's like save this person, finish this combat before this building blows up. Hold off everybody for a certain number of rounds, which is all stuff you can do in other games, but we've codified it to help the director get there.
Instead of it being like a thing you have to kind of build yourself and tack on to the existing framework. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could easily bring it into another game for sure.
Exactly. A lot of this you can actually bring into another game if you're more comfortable that way. It's just a lot of really good advice for running a game in your home game. But in Draw Steel, all that scale is kind of built in, which is really cool. Another aspect of, before jumping over to the monsters, another aspect of the cinematic part of the hero sort of fantasy that you got going on over here are kind of, let's see, what's the best way to put it? The example I'm trying to get over to is the fact that we have kits, right? So your kits are basically your specialized set of equipment. You're not really tracking individual pieces of arrows that you have in your quiver or anything like that. You have a bow and arrow. You have a ranger kit, right? That comes with a short weapon, one-handed weapon. It comes with a bow of some sort, but we describe it loosely so you can fill in the blanks yourself. Maybe not necessarily you're using a bow and arrow, but you are absolutely hurling sort of magical arrows that you create out of your own bones, for instance. And that kind of helps to kind of open up the door towards what you're accomplishing in the game. And we've built it in a way where you can improvise sort of neat ideas that the game itself can still absolutely handle. And I think a lot of that also lends towards this idea of cinema.
Right. It focused on the flavor and being able to customize it instead of being strict about it. Okay, cool.
Pretty much.
Yeah. One thing that I think everybody should do in every game is allow players to rename spells, right?
Yes.
And that will help get them out of it. So we tried to give all of our abilities that you use in combat really flavorful descriptions, right? So that when a player sits down, they don't say I swing my sword, right? They say I use brutal slam, right? Or, hey, I'm going to use I work better alone. Right. And it's this ability that does this. Right. And what's fun about that is you get players then to describe what they are doing because they have these evocative names. And so telling your players rename your abilities, rename your spells, rename your cool moves so that they're unique to you can help in games too, because part of being cinematic is you don't want all that work on you as the person running the game. You want people to share the love and get involved in it and describe running up the back of an ogre to punch it in the jaw, right? So yeah, encourage them to do that.
Our Virtuoso comes with a bunch of songs that they can end up learning and playing over time. They all have names and they all have lyrics, but we made it that way so that you're encouraged to be all nah, that's not what my bard is performing. They aren't a metal singer. They are sort of like a country singer, for instance, and they can rename Thunder Mother for that regard.
So maybe it's just the zeitgeist, or maybe I just really like you both. But what's really funny is, so in an episode that'll have just come out before this one, Celeste and I just so it's our 100th episode of doing DMnastics together. And what I decided to do was just her and I riff 10 pieces of exercise advice. Just do these 10 things. It's very freeform. I hope it sounds good. That's a whole other thing. But the last piece of advice I gave was very similar to this. So I really love hearing you say it because it makes me feel better about saying it prior to this. But the idea of just scraping off the numbers, figure out what doesn't matter and just scrape it off. Have a replacement, because some players aren't comfortable with answering these questions. So have an answer, but don't give the answer. See if they're willing to give the answer. Because what just dawned on me is why do I have to name the monster? If you have a really evocative description and a super cool image, why do I care? What difference does it make to me as the director, the DM, the game master? It doesn't matter. Here, I describe the monster, show them the picture, and ask my players, what do you call it?
What is this thing?
Yeah, because what if this group of adventurers are the first players in this world to experience this monster? What is it called? What do you go back to town and say that you fought? And like, why not? Like, and so like, just this concept that that I think is becoming a little bit more prominent, because like there's just this level of agency that, like, sure, if it's the main NPC, yeah, probably don't. Maybe not. But like to find the spaces and places that like are important that you can't necessarily give up, but the ones that you can, just let it go. Just, but again, have an answer, because your players may not, but to hold on to that answer and see if they do. Cause like the idea of describing a maneuver, having like my fighter at the table say, this is Bill's wallop. I don't know, whatever. Who cares? That sounds awesome. And then forevermore, they're just like, and I do Bill's wallop. And you know how excited Bill's going to be every time Bill gets to shout Bill's wallop, or I roll the 20 on Bill's wallop. Why not? It doesn't. Yeah. So yes, and yes.
I love that.
So talk us through kind of the design principles and what's helped you as you are working on your respective parts of the project.
Yeah, I think for me, a big part of the game, and this is actually the first thing mechanically that Matt and I came up with. This was like 2 years before work actually started on Draw Steel in earnest.
Yeah.
I was out there at the office, right? I live on the other side of the country from where our offices are, but I had gone out there for a week, and we just had like a half a day to kill. And Matt was like, we always talk about working on our own RPG. Let's talk about like what would be in there. And it was really fun, and just me and him like kicking ideas around a whiteboard. And he said, the big thing that I want is like, when I think about D&D, it is a game that is, because we design D&D stuff, right? Like it is a game where often it doesn't follow a heroic arc. So like, let's put everything aside that we know from working on D&D and talk about like, how would we make a game that is explicitly heroic? Because I think that is actually what a lot of people want when they sit down to play a role-playing game, right? They want to be heroes. They want to change the world. They want to affect things. And so I had said to him, like, I think one big thing that can happen is that in any kind of game, not just D&D, in a lot of games, you can kill your momentum, because what's happening is like, oh, we're going to go fight Strahd. Let's hang out in this room for a little bit and shut the door and take an 8-hour nap, because I don't have my 7th level spell slot. And I feel like I really need that 7th level spell. And like, you might have plenty of other spell slots, but it's like, no, I want to be as prepared as possible. And so we talked about like, well, what's a way to incentivize players to actually press on? Because when you think about heroic media, right, it's like the story isn't like, okay, we do this and then we stop and we rest, and then there's another big fight and then we stop and we rest. It's like, no, you keep going and you keep pressing yourself. Heroes press on, right? And even when it's like we're at the, we're down and out, we're bruised, Captain America is strapping that half shield onto his arm to fight Thanos alone, right? And so how do we get there? How do we get people to do that? Well, we got to incentivize you as a player. And so a big part of the heroic aspect is this game, and it's inspired by a lot of video games that we see, right? Is instead of winnowing down your resources, the number of rages you have per day, your spell slots or whatever, right? You build up your heroic resources, right? And so it's like a limit break bar in a Street Fighter game, right? Where it's like, boom, 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 now I can do my ultimate because I've filled up the bar. And so we talked about like, okay, what you need two things. One is, as fights go on, they should get more interesting. It shouldn't be like, I did all this stuff at the beginning of the fight and now I just swing a sword. It's like, no. It should be that like the coolest stuff ends the fight. It doesn't kick off the fight. So the idea is you have heroic resources that build up over time, and each class can use them to do something different. And each class has a unique resource that they use, right? And so it might be like, hey, as an elementalist, I can normally shoot a couple rays of fire on my own, but as my heroic resources build up, I can create giant balls of fire, right? I can turn into like a fiery being like the Human Torch and fly around, and I've got to build up to that. But then we also need a mechanic that says each fight gets cooler as it goes on, right? Because that's a thing that we see where it's like, okay, let's take Lord of the Rings as an example, right? Lord of the Rings, okay, we've had some battles. Oh, now we're having Helm's Deep. whoa, this is intense, right? And well, what are we going to do after Helm's Deep? Well, I don't know. Maybe we're going to have like this last stand, right, at the gates of Mordor. And so we wanted to follow that kind of narrative too, where it's like, as you press on, you reach those cooler stages earlier and earlier in the battle, and then you maybe can do them multiple times throughout the battle. And so, and we like, that's the one part of the game that's actually stayed consistently. We've changed how our core dice work a million times. We've changed everything, every other rule under the sun. But this idea of you have heroic resources, and then each time you achieve either you successfully complete a combat encounter or a puzzle or a montage or a negotiation or whatever, you earn victories. And those victories also increase your power as you go throughout the day. And the tension there is you do have a limited amount of healing power. And so like you get to this point in every game where you're like, ooh, should we press on? I only have like 1 or 2 more recoveries left, but I have all these victories and I'm going to be able to do so much cool stuff if we keep going, right? And it's fun to see people have that conversation. So for us, that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So there's still risk, and there's still like, anyway, you explained it very well. I like that a lot. I feel like most RPGs struggle with the resource thing, right? Like I was just playing some video games last night and I ran out of a resource and I'm like, well, I gotta like go all the way back, to get more of this thing before I can finish. Like, it's just, that's the least fun part about it for sure.
Now on the director's side of things, with the monsters, as it were, the biggest sort of idea that I need to make sure is always like present when working on the monster book and sort of the director's side of the table is the fact that the director is also a player, right? So yes, the heroes are building up their victories, but the more they build up victories, well, that means I have more points that I can put into my encounters. That means that I can throw stronger monsters at them. I also have a heroic resource. It is called malice. Right. And that also grows the more victories that the heroes gain. So now basically the director is given more and more opportunities to challenge the players, the more opportunities to actually do cool things on the battlefield. Putting that all aside, after I just kind of like talked it up, for instance, the monster design is all about making sure that your monsters are going to at least do one cool thing on the battlefield, right? Like, yes, you have all these cool little toys to play with, but if they're not going to be able to like do that cool thing, well, then you feel frustrated at the end of the day. They're going to survive long enough so that they can actually make an impact on the heroes, and the heroes have a chance to respond to what you're doing. Or you have so many minions out on the field that like if they don't clear all of them out, well, then they're going to swarm the heroes, and that feels good. And as the battle kind of like wanes down and the heroes are managing to succeed against your forces, you can use your malice to cause sort of like encounter-wide effects to happen. The goblins let off their swamp gas and everyone starts choking because it smells really, really bad. Or the main villain, the leader, ends up pulling off these things called villain actions or villain powers, whatever we're calling them right now, which is basically this one-time super cinematic like ability that can really wreck through a heroic party if they aren't like ready for it, basically. And the more like the battle goes on, the more opportunities, the more malice you end up growing as a director to keep the battle interesting. So even as like your side is waning down and the heroes are winning, you still have a chance to fight them back. You're going to be able to do a lot more deadly things with 2 goblins at the end of round 3 than you were with like 7 goblins at the start of round 1, for instance.
Yeah, it's the old ninja theory, right? That in a kung fu movie, right? That when the hero is fighting a bunch of different people, that the fewer ninjas they're fighting, the more powerful those ninjas become. And we have harnessed that in this, and it works pretty great.
One other thing to put on the table about the director side of things is that we also want to make sure that like being a director feels cool, and the hero players are all like, oh, I think I want to be a director. I want those cool powers. So we are like trying to build more GMs in the world. Not secretly, very overtly, in fact, just by showing how fun it can be.
That's a great segue into the next question, which is about like running the game itself. So it sounds like you're the person running the game. Are they called the director?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. How you would prepare to run a game of Draw Steel, say like a 2-3 hour session, maybe it's like their first time, but yeah, what's the kind of work that someone would have to put in?
Yeah. So I think, we've got a couple of tools that can help people do that Willy has actually developed, which are essentially, sheets, right? They're form fillable PDFs where if you want to create encounters and stuff, you can fill out these sheets and you put your monster stamina and stuff. And it very quickly, you can see like, okay, how hard of an encounter will this be for this group of player characters, right? I think for us, and it's hard because I feel biased, right? This is the game that I've been working on for a long time, but we see a lot of people say that they feel like the game is easier to prep because we've tried to make encounter preparation, building your encounters kind of straightforward. We've got a lot of advice about, because it is played out on a grid, how to pick battle maps, right? And you want to pick like, I spend probably a lot of my time preparing an encounter, a combat encounter, looking at or drawing out a map, because you want to have like, you don't want it to just be a blank field, right? You want it to be like, oh, there's stuff to push people into and ledges to get knocked off of and dangerous terrain and all kinds of stuff, because it is fun to pick. How many times have we played the video game where it's like, yeah, you could just punch this guy, but did you know that if you uppercut him, he ends up on the spikes at the bottom of Mortal Kombat, right? So those are the kinds of things that like, we want you to be having the fun part of that, right? Like the fun part of that prep is picking that kind of stuff. And so we try to make it straightforward, and we're like, this is how you prep a montage. This is how you prep a negotiation. And we also then give you a lot of examples that you can drop into your own game. And so a lot of what I do when I am prepping a game of Draw Steel is I think about like, okay, what are the scenes in which the players will happen? Kind of like you would in any game. Like they could go here, they could go here, they could go here. I'll put together the encounters that I think could happen there. And you're kind of ready to go then. The rules help a lot with like creating those things and making it easy for you, as well as the tools that we have put together. And I think for us, a lot of it is also then thinking about like, I don't often, because the game has this explicit sort of heroic feel, there's a lot of things you don't necessarily have to prepare for. Like, well, what if they just let that child die, for instance, right? Like that's probably not a thing that's going to happen in Draw Steel, where the heroes may just walk away from a problem. It's like, no, you can almost predict that like, you're going to make something hard and it's going to be hard to save these people, and they will take the bait and go for it because that's what the game is telling them it is about. So that helps.
The players came to the table to play a game. So like they're not going to walk away from a situation which they can play more game.
Yeah. Willy, how do you prep?
I prep with the PDFs. I mean, for a 2 to 3 hour session, a lot of what I'm thinking about is like, okay, let's say that's 3 victories that are on the table for tonight. So I can divide that up across 3 different scenarios, 3 different encounters, whether it's a montage, 2 montages in a combat, a negotiation, and a really hard combat, as it were. And I'm like, okay, I've got these blocks to work with, and I have a general idea of where, or like the goals of the party and what they're trying to do at that point. And then, yes, I do pull out these encounter sheets. They are made for each individual encounter type. It's very much sort of like, okay, I can reference this when they totally succeed at the montage, this if they have partially succeeded at the montage, or this if they totally beefed it. I have a bunch of fields for like, okay, what are some challenges that they're going to be able to go through during this montage? All the fields are there to kind of like prompt you to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to be throwing in front of the players. And I don't have to think much more beyond that. With the exception of course, building out sort of the map itself, which isn't included on the combat encounter sheet, because that would be a very, very big encounter sheet. That's where most of the work is probably going to come in, though. But in kind of like dividing it up in sort of this sort of prompt response sort of way, it feels a lot easier to direct. Like after I'm done like running the game, it feels, I don't feel as fatigued, for instance, because we did a lot of that sort of prep work ahead of time for you.
Mm. And are these going to be available in the PDF levels of the pledges people have made, those encounter builders? Sweet. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Out of the box. That's what we like.
Yeah, and hopefully it's one of those things where like the math won't line up, but honestly you could use that sheet to run a lot of different games. Similarly, I think like negotiation, the structure we have for negotiation, it's just a framework for, hey, I want to have you ever had that thing where you're like, we're going to have a dramatic conversation, and then it kind of is resolved in like one roll, and you're like, well, you passed the DC, so I guess, or like, well, I think we've talked long enough, I guess, right? And we just give you a framework for like, how long is an NPC willing to deal with the characters? How much of their BS will they take? What will they offer depending on how interested they are, right? Because a negotiation is often not, hey, give me this. Okay, right? A negotiation is, hey, give me this. I can't do that, but I can do this. Really? Well, what if I do this for you? Well, then maybe I can do the thing you initially, right? It's like that kind of give and take. And we give you a framework for that honestly you can bring into other games too, right? And that's all on the negotiation sheet that people have there.
What's beautiful about these negotiation rules is that they do kind of fall into the background once you've kind of experienced them enough. They are literally there to kind of like help keep the conversation moving forward. I do recommend trying to watch James running a negotiation because he does it silently, and it does kind of come across as just a cinematic conversation between two parties, as it were. But he's playing by the rules, and it's really cool.
I have too many questions, so then sometimes it's hard to ask any of them. No, the one that did come to mind that just like total left field. So this is not going to be a segue at all, but that's okay. That's the joy of podcasting. Is there like a standardized setting that you guys are also creating for this? It just popped into my brain. I thought I'd ask.
It's a great question.
Yeah. So the setting is, if anybody's familiar with Matt Colville's like actual play, The Chain of Acheron, or they've like read Matt's novels. Matt's got a couple novels out there. So we sort of think of the game right now as having 3 official settings, but they're all within one place. So if we start with the most zoomed in kind of, there is this place called Capital, right? Which is this big city. It is a giant city that is very sort of metropolitan, right? There's all sorts of different peoples there mixing together, and there's a lot of intrigue. You would go there to play out a little bit more of like a spy heroic thing where it's like, oh, you're working for the guilds because they're trying to take power from these evil noble houses, right, who are doing X, Y, or Z, you know. But there's like strong fantasy elements. For instance, there's a whole neighborhood that is just undead within this city, right? Then there is Vasloria, which is sort of our European medieval fantasy analog, right? And that is where you're going to find a lot of the content we make in this first couple of years of Draw Steel, because we think it's what people are most used to, right? And that's where you've got like large, small villages and hamlets and, you know, cities that are walled and stuff. And in between, you know, vast wilderness that might have some monsters and stuff there. And they are dealing with a threat. In fact, Capital and Vasloria are both dealing with this threat. There's a guy named Ajax, the Invincible Overlord.
He's a jerk.
Yeah, what if Alexander the Great had magic items? It's sort of the elevator pitch, right? He's just trying to take everything over and thinks he deserves to be the king. And he's doing it by way of gathering as many magical artifacts as he can. He's in the monster book. And then finally, all of this takes place on a planet called Orden. And Orden has all of this other stuff on it that we hint at and we talk about, but we don't really get too in depth in. And Orden is in the Timescape. And the Timescape is like a multiverse with all of these different worlds, which are like planets, but also they're like planes, kind of. And so like Hell is a place in the Timescape that you could like you could get on a Timescape boat, go to Hell if you want to, right? And so there are all these, and like if you want to create your own world, your world could be one of the worlds of the Timescape. And so then if you want your players to go to Orden and hang out in Capital or Vasloria, they could do that. Now, most people, right? Like most people, if you're a medieval peasant, they don't really know about the cosmology of the world. They're not getting on spaceships and going everywhere. But there are some places in the Timescape where travel through the Timescape is common, right? And some of the ancestries you'll see in the hero book are from these other parts of the Timescape. So there's the Time Raiders, who are like many armed individuals who look like something out of a Mad Max movie, and Memenek, which are like people who come from Axiom, the plane of uttermost law, which is very machine oriented. And so they're like, They're people, but they're like made of porcelain or made of metal, right? Or made of like elegantly carved wood. But they have, you know, all of the thoughts and emotions and sapience that you would expect of a human.
Time Raiders sounds like a 90s Lego set in the best way.
That's exactly the vibe that they're going for.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say that is exactly it. Yes. Yeah. A lot of them
Incredible.
have mohawks.
Yeah.
Time Raiders have mohawks.
I'm looking at pictures now. This is great.
Well, we're coming up on our hour mark. So I think the other question that we have often, and we'll have to kind of shape this question a little bit more for this particular conversation, is, and I think we did a great job of something I didn't recognize I wanted to do, but we did it anyways, is I didn't really want to get into the weeds of the mechanics of the system because I don't think that's what it wasn't the conversation I wanted to have. Great job, us. I don't think that benefits the conversation because I really wanted a high level conversation about what Draw Steel is to showcase all the great work that you guys have been doing on it. So like, where would you point someone if they wanted to see, like, either, I don't know if there are great places to videos that show somebody running Draw Steal, if there are any actual plays of someone doing Draw Steal. I'm sure Matt is talking about it somewhere, probably actively saying something that has just been talked about before. I'm probably doing it right now and you don't even know. Like where would you point people? Is there preview packets? Is there going on to BackerKit? Basically, like the homework is if someone wants to know more about Draw Steal, where would you point them?
Depending on when your listeners are listening to this, our plan right now, and always in motion is the future. So if this didn't happen, I apologize. But our plan right now is that we will release the PDFs for Draw Steal by July 17th to our backers and stuff. So there's if you're interested in looking at the full game, you'll be able to look at the PDFs by then. And then hardcovers will also be available and start shipping probably sometime in late summer, early fall to people. However, if you want a lower cost of investment for looking at stuff, there's a couple different things that we will be putting out. So one is we're working on a starter adventure that's going to come with pre-gens. It's about 3 levels of play. Draw Steal is a 10-level game, so that's quite a bit of play, called The Delian Tomb. You may be familiar with the Delian Tomb as a 1-page dungeon that Matt made. Well, I turned it into 80,000 words. So, and now there's a village. It's not just a dungeon, right? Like there's a village. There's all these other points of interest around it that people can check out. It is very similar to Hamlet.
I know. I just know that he loves Hamlet too. Anyway,
He
does love Hamlet. Yeah. There is another, and that one is like very much onboarding, right? So that one is very much like we kind of hold your hand and get into it. However, this game's been playtesting for a while, right? And there's one other place we can talk about and why that is. But this game's been playtesting. So we are also putting out an amazing author named Leon Barolaro is writing a second starter set for us, which is like an advanced starter set, and that is called The Fall of Black Bottom. Black Bottom is a city that gets destroyed, and you are there when it happens, and that is the conceit of the adventure. And that one is like the Delian Tomb is sort of like pastoral, heroic fantasy. Fall of Black Bottom is very much like you are thrown into the deep end, and you better be ready to fight some demons and stuff. In addition to those two things, there is a free con adventure that people will be able to check out online, which is like a 4-hour sort of thing. You can run conventions. It can be cut down at 3 to 1 hours. If you want to run it, you can run it at community center, library, online, whatever. That will not have all of the rules, though. So you need somebody who has the rules of the game to be able to run it. But that will have pre-gens and stuff like that. If you just want to sort of see what a Draw Steal adventure is like, steal it for another game, that's there. And then finally, we will also have the Patreon, right?
Yes.
And our Patreon is available for $8 a month. And if you go on to the Patreon, you can see all of the previous rules. Like if you want to see every iteration of Draw Steal that we've publicly playtested, it is on there. If you want to read development blogs that Willy and I have written about why we made certain design choices, if you want to see Q&As with us on video, all of that kind of stuff is on the Patreon. And we will also be previewing new products on there. So like the Summoner and the Ancestries that Willy mentioned, the adventures we're talking about, all of those get play tested through the Patreon as well. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there that you will be able to see, plus some finished content. So those are kind of the best places to go. That's all. If you Google MCDM Patreon, you will find it. If you go to mcdmproductions.com, you can find links to our shop. You can go onto BackerKit to pre-order it if this comes out before July 17th. And you really want to pre-order stuff, head on over to BackerKit, search for the MCDM RPG or Draw Steal. I believe if you go to drawsteal.com, it will take you to the BackerKit page right now. Also, it has an open game license that you can check out as well. So I imagine you'll be able to get some stuff through that if you really want to preview.
What about the both of you? Where would you direct people on this World Wide Web to watch anything else that you two are creating?
I mean, I'm still hanging out on Twitter, just kind of holding the boat down at the moment. You can find the Willy Boo at the Willy Boo. I'm not doing much like publicly at the moment, but typically you might be able to find me mostly in the MCDM Discord. It's probably where I'm loudest right now.
Yeah, that's mcdm.gg/Discord. If you're interested, I have made the jump to the skies. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm at the Willy Boo on Blue Sky. So no, I'm at James Introcaso, which is just my name. But of course, if your listeners are really interested in hearing me, I'm sure I will be back here soon. I've got the gold jacket, but I'm going platinum, baby. Expect me. Expect me when the clock strikes 12.
Perfect. We will, yes, we'll make it happen. Or just Willy will come back.
Hey,
I'll steal your jacket.
Far more entertaining than I am, so I don't blame you.
We just want to thank only Willy and definitely not James for coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, it was so much fun to chat with them. You can tell that they've put a lot of work into Draw Steel, and just watching Willy's eyes light up as he was talking about all the fun stuff he gets to design and work with was worth the price of admission for me, which was free.
Yep, and if anyone has stayed this far, as a fun little treat for you, listener, I have seen the book because, of course I have. That is one of the perks of all of this effort, I guess, is seeing it. I don't know who they are having do this much art, but they are putting that person to work and paying them handsomely, I am sure. But it is a gorgeous book, and I am going to say one of the simplest solutions to what I think is one of the biggest problems in most RPG books. One of the first things when you open the book is the glossary. And it is a revolutionary change for RPG books that I hope becomes a predominant factor in this entire industry. It blew my mind in the best way possible.
That they had good organization. What a concept.
Yeah, and I immediately messaged James back to say, hey, yeah, well done. It's very simple. Wow, why not? Because it's the glossary. It's like, these things are important. And it's not an index. It's a glossary. These things are important terms, and here are their definitions. And it's not, and he also then assured me immediately, hey, this is an earliest version. When it's really done, those will all also be hyperlinked.
Yeah, in the PDF version. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember reading through the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook for the first time and being like, now what is this? And having to flip all the way to the back to find out what it was or where I could find the definition of this new term I had never heard of. Now I know the rules, but then it would have been very helpful. So that's awesome. All right, if you feel so inclined and you enjoyed today's episode, head to Apple Podcasts or Podchaser or Good Pods, or you can go to Spotify and give us 5 stars and drop a little review. If you leave us a review, we will read it on an upcoming episode, and we appreciate all of those 5-star reviews.
You know what? If you see fit, we are hosted directly on Podbean. You can follow us directly on Podbean itself. You can leave comments on episodes, and you can do all those things as well.
As always, you can follow us on X, Twitter at DMS_block. You can like us on Facebook. You can go follow us on Instagram or TikTok. We are not consistently posting on any of these right now, but if you go follow us, maybe we will.
But as always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like We're Not Just Our D&D Characters, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, the Bad Venture Club, and more.
Thank you for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God,
killing characters,
and lowering the egos of all the other people at the table. I am DM Derrick, pulling out my phone so that I remember one of my sign-offs that I wrote down months ago and that I found recently and said, oh yeah, this is where I put them. I'm DM Derrick, telling you to keep it chaotic and keep it clever.
I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
So every time I hear the term draw steel, I always wonder how difficult it is to draw like the metal steel. And then I think about drawing the character steel. Then I think about that terrible movie with Shaq. And then I think about the movie Kazam. Then I think about the Mandela effect about how Sinbad was in a movie, dressed as a genie, but he never was. It was actually a commercial where he was just as a genie, and now you know.
But he is in Jingle All the Way.
Goodbye.